The last thing anyone expected to see on a Thursday morning was their untimely demise, but Valoria had always been full of surprises. The planetary shield wall hummed like an old fridge, the kind you'd find in your grandma's basement and pray doesn't explode. Rumor had it the shield was a relic from the ancient Vorni, a species so advanced they had apparently forgotten how to make anything that lasted beyond a millennium. Tessa Marlowe, engineer extraordinaire, or at least the only one sober enough to care, was elbow-deep in cables, cursing in languages she barely understood. "If I had a credit for every time this thing croaked, I'd buy a one-way ticket off this rock," she muttered, yanking on a wire that had the audacity to spark back at her. She was resourceful, which on Valoria meant she had the uncanny ability to fix things just enough to make sure they didn't immediately kill everyone. Iran Zephyr strolled in, his diplomatic suit somehow free of wrinkles, an achievement considering the chaos outside. "Ah, Tessa, if only sarcasm could power engines, we'd be free from alien relics and existential dread," he said, leaning against the doorway like he was posing for a Diplomat of the Year cover photo. "Iran, lovely to see you not doing anything useful," Tessa quipped, fiddling with a control panel that looked like it had been designed by a schizophrenic octopus. "You here to watch me work or just to make my day worse?" "A bit of both," Iran replied, flashing a grin that could melt hearts, or at least moderately annoyed engineers. "The council's in a tizzy. Apparently, the idea of being vaporized doesn't sit well with the electorate." "Who knew?" Tessa snorted, trying not to think about how the shield's failure meant more than just a bad hair day. "Guess they finally figured out that being Ash is bad for re-election." Outside, the sky was a kaleidoscope of impending doom, streaks of red and green as the shield flickered. People scurried like ants whose nest had just been kicked by an intergalactic bully. The local fauna, normally indifferent to human antics, had started evacuating days ago. Even space squirts had their limits. "So any bright ideas on fixing this mess, or do we all start practicing our final words?" Iran asked, his tone light but edged with the kind of anxiety that only came from the prospect of spontaneous combustion. "Oh sure, I have a plan," Tessa said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Step 1, don't die. Step 2, see step 1. "Brilliant," Iran deadpanned. And here I was worried. As the planet's unofficial voice of optimism, Iran had a knack for looking at a dumpster fire and suggesting s'mores. But even his relentless cheer had its limits. The shield's collapse wasn't just a technology failure, it was a death sentence for millions. "You really think there's something ancient and alien that can be fixed with duct tape and profanity?" Iran asked, watching Tessa as she kicked a particularly stubborn panel. "If not, we're all screwed anyway," Tessa replied, channeling all the cynicism she'd accumulated over years of living on a planet that thought weather forecasts were recommendations. She glanced at Iran, who seemed more concerned about the potential for bad press than global annihilation. "Where's your boss in all this? Got any grand speeches planned for when the world ends?" "Last I checked, Alara was trying to convince the council to start planning for the worst," Iran said, rolling his eyes. "As if the worst isn't already at our doorstep, knocking politely before it kicks it in. Planning for the worst." "Is she aware that we're already in it?" Tessa snorted. "Let me guess, they want to form a committee to discuss forming a committee about maybe doing something. You know it. Democracy at its finest," Iran replied with a wry smile. "But hey, if we're going out, might as well go out surrounded by bureaucracy, right?" "I'll drink to that," Tessa said, though her flask was unfortunately empty, something she intended to rectify should they miraculously survive the day. Suddenly, the lights flickered, casting ominous shadows that seemed to crawl across the walls. Tessa's stomach dropped. "That can't be good," she muttered, rushing to the console as alarms began blaring in a symphony of panic. "Tessa, tell me you have a plan," Iran said, the humor draining from his voice as reality set in. "I have a plan," Tessa confirmed, hitting buttons with the kind of desperation that came from knowing you were absolutely out of your depth. It's just not a very good one. Iran ran a hand through his hair, the perfect coif now slightly disheveled, which in Valorian terms meant he was practically in meltdown mode. Well, if this is it, I just want you to know. Iran, if you're about to confess your undying love, save it, Tessa interrupted, eyes locked on the display. I'd rather die with some dignity left. The ground shuddered as if the planet itself were getting in on the irony, and Iran stumbled, catching himself with a curse. You know, in times like these, I wish I'd taken that job on the moon colony. I'm sure the pay was terrible, Tessa replied, yanking a level with more force than necessary, hoping the shield would somehow respond positively to violent encouragement. But at least they have a working shield, Iran said, grimacing as another shudder rattled the room, and less chance of imminent death. Always a bonus, Tessa agreed, though her heart wasn't in it. The shield's control panel spat sparks like an angry cat, and she was running out of ideas and time. Just then a voice crackled over the comms, distorted but unmistakably belonging to Alara, the Council's fearless, or at least recklessly optimistic leader. Tessa, Iran, status report. Status, Tessa replied, rolling her eyes. Well, Alara, we're about one spark away from a fireworks show nobody asked for. Iran nodded, grimacing at the chaotic readouts that screamed failure in a dozen languages. And by the looks of it, we're the main attraction. Alara's sigh was audible even through the static. We need options, people, not defeatism. Options? How about running? Tessa suggested. Or hiding? Not helpful, Alara shot back, her frustration palpable. We need a solution. Preferably one that doesn't involve us being space dust. Tessa glanced at Iran, who shrugged helplessly as if to say, we tried. But she wasn't about to let a piece of ancient tech take them out without a fight. All right, she said, more to herself than anyone else. Time for some good old-fashioned engineering prowess. Iran raised an eyebrow. You mean hitting it until it works? Exactly, Tessa replied, her grin all teeth and defiance. We didn't come this far just to give up, right? Speak for yourself, Iran muttered. But he joined her at the console anyway because what else was there to do? They were engineers and diplomats, not heroes. But sometimes heroism was just another term for delaying the inevitable. The shield flickered again, and Tessa's hands flew over the controls, her fingers dancing a frantic tango of last-ditch effort and blind hope. The ancient systems groaned, the room vibrating with the force of technology that had no business being this useful. She held her breath as the lights dimmed, a final warning before everything went dark. But instead of the catastrophic failure they expected, there was a sudden calm and eerie silence that followed the chaos like the eye of a storm. What happened? Iran asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Tessa stared at the console, then at the shield status indicator, which had inexplicably turned green. I think it worked, she said, disbelief coloring her words. We might have actually done it. Iran let out a shaky laugh, relief palpable enough to taste. So we live to die another day. Looks like it, Tessa replied, though she knew better than to celebrate too soon. In Valoria, victory was never guaranteed. Alara's voice crackled back to life over the comms, her tone a mix of surprise and residual panic. Well done, both of you. Now let's make sure it stays that way. Tessa and Iran exchanged a look, the weight of what they just narrowly avoided sinking in. But as they stood there, holding off disaster with little more than stubbornness and a bit of luck, they couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. You know, Iran said, breaking the silence, if we keep surviving these close calls, I might just start believing in miracles. Tessa laughed, a sound more genuine than she'd expected. Careful, Iran. Optimism's contagious. In that case, he replied, grinning, I guess we better start preparing for the next catastrophe. And with that they returned to their stations, knowing that while they had won this battle, the war was far from over. But for now they had each other, a planet that hadn't exploded, and the promise of another day. Bring on the next disaster, Tessa murmured, her eyes on the horizon, daring the universe to do its worst. The console made a noise like an offended goose, and Tessa smacked it with a wrench she kept on hand for just such occasions. The shield's status light flickered, and she let out a relieved breath as it grudgingly returned to a stable green. Valoria wasn't out of the woods yet, more like it had paused at the edge to catch its breath before the inevitable plunge back into chaos. Iran, meanwhile, was busy fussing with his hair in the reflection of a nearby metal surface. Do you think we could start charging admission for these near-death experiences? I bet some folks would pay for the thrill of living on the brink. If we're charging, I want royalties, Tessa shot back, watching the shield's readouts like a hawk. Or at least enough to buy a drink strong enough to make me forget this entire month. That's the spirit, Iran replied, nearly convincing himself he wasn't actually terrified. Speaking of spirits, maybe we can convince the council to fund a bar in here. Before Tessa could respond with another pithy comment, the comms crackled again, but this time it wasn't Alara's voice on the line. It was something else entirely, a voice that made the hairs on the back of Tessa's neck stand up like she'd just licked a battery. "This is Quarren of the V-Rix," the voice announced, each word carrying the weight of someone who was used to being listened to. "We have observed your plight and offer assistance." Tessa and Iran exchanged glances, the kind that screamed, "What fresh hell is this?" without the need for words. "V-Rix sounds like a brand of industrial cleaner," Iran muttered, just loud enough for Tessa to hear. Tessa pressed the comm button, attempting her best impression of professionalism while wearing a grease-stained jumpsuit. "Quarren, this is Tessa Marlowe. What kind of assistance are we talking about?" There was a pause, the kind that stretched long enough to make anyone squirm before Quarren replied. "We propose a cultural exchange, knowledge for knowledge. Our technology can stabilize your planetary shield. Ah, the classic 'will save you if you show us how you make pizza' deal," Iran said, nodding sagely. What could possibly go wrong? Tessa couldn't help but chuckle. Right, because nothing ever goes south when aliens start taking an interest in our culture. Quarren's voice returned, unperturbed by their sarcasm. "In return, we wish to learn about your species' traditions. Your holidays. Well, it's not like we're in a position to say no," Iran remarked, crossing his arms. "Besides, they might change their mind when they realize how much we love setting off explosives for fun." Tessa turned back to the comm. "Okay, Quarren, we agree to a trial exchange. But just so we're clear, we're keeping our hands on the self-destruct button, metaphorically speaking." "Understood," Quarren replied. "Prepare for my arrival." The comm went silent, leaving Tessa and Iran to stare at each other in the uncomfortable quiet of impending alien visitation. "Well," Tessa said, breaking the silence, "this should be interesting." Iran shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. "At least if they turn out to be hostile, we won't have to worry about the shield failing." "Always looking on the bright side," Tessa replied dryly. "It's almost charming." "Almost," Iran echoed. The arrival of Quarren was heralded not by flashes of light or the ominous hum of an alien spacecraft, but by a quiet knock on the engineering bay door. Tessa blinked, half expecting the universe to reveal it was all a prank, then opened it to find a figure standing there that could only be described as peculiar. Quarren was tall, impossibly so, with skin that seemed to shimmer like oil on water. Their eyes, large and unblinking, were a shade of blue that was just a bit too intense for comfort. They wore something that looked like a cross between ceremonial robes and a wetsuit, which probably made sense to someone somewhere. "Greetings," Quarren said, with a voice that managed to sound friendly yet firm, like a librarian who'd had enough of your nonsense. Hello," Tessa replied, waving awkwardly. "Welcome to Valoria, where everything's broken and the people are sarcastic." Quarren inclined their head. "I look forward to understanding your culture. Shall we begin?" Iran stepped forward, offering a hand. Iran Zephyr, resident diplomat and purveyor of bad jokes. Quarren took the offered hand, their grip surprisingly gentle. "I am Quarren. Your humor is noted." Tessa snorted, unable to help herself. Good luck with that. It doesn't come with instructions. The alien tilted their head, a gesture that Tessa decided to interpret as curiosity rather than confusion. Your technology is intriguing, Quarren said, looking around the room as if the mess of wires and panels held the secrets to the universe. Intriguing's one word for it, Tessa said, gesturing to the control panel. Mostly it's just old and temperamental, like a retired boxer with a bad knee. Quarren ran a hand over the panel, their touch leaving faint trails of light. We will help stabilize your shield. In exchange, we wish to observe your cultural practices. Iran clapped his hands together. Great! Luckily, we're about due for a holiday. Ever heard of Wasting Day? It involves a lot of food, loud noises, and pretending we don't have crippling existential dread. Quarren blinked those large eyes slowly. This sounds enlightening, Tessa laughed, shaking her head. Welcome to humanity, where every day could be your last, so why not celebrate by setting off fireworks and eating too much? Quarren nodded, perhaps not fully understanding but willing to play along. We wish to begin with this wasting day. Show us how you waste. Tessa exchanged a glance with Iran, who shrugged. Well, when in doubt, start with the basics. First lesson, how to blow things up in the name of tradition. As preparations for Wasting Day began in earnest, the engineering bay became a chaotic blend of practicality and festivity. Tessa was elbow-deep in wires, explaining the finer points of explosive entertainment as Iran attempted to teach Quarren the subtle art of not overdoing the fireworks. Okay, so the trick is to light them and then get as far away as possible, Iran instructed, gesturing animatedly. Otherwise, you're gonna get a face full of regret, Quarren observed, head tilted in that now familiar gesture. And this is enjoyable to your people, Tessa smirked, wiping her hands on a rag. Oh yeah, nothing says we're alive like a controlled explosion. It's like a metaphor for humanity, beautiful but potentially disastrous. Ah, metaphors, Quarren said, nodding. I see. Iran gave Tessa a look that said, is this gonna work? But she just waved him off. If alien diplomacy meant teaching someone how to party like a human, they'd make it through somehow. As the sky began to darken, the makeshift festival took shape. Streams of lights crisscrossed the engineering bay, and tables groaned under the weight of hastily prepared food. People gathered, their faces lit by the glow of the shield, still holding, thanks to Quarren's mysterious touch. The air buzzed with the kind of nervous energy that only comes from impending disaster, but for once, it was the kind people were choosing to ignore. Tessa found herself standing next to Quarren as Iran attempted to lead a particularly enthusiastic group in a rendition of an old Earth song no one quite remembered the words to. This is quite the event, Quarren observed, their voice barely audible over the noise. Yeah, we try, Tessa replied, arms crossed as she watched Iran swing an imaginary baton like a conductor on speed. It's all about forgetting, I guess. Just for a little while until the universe reminds us how small we are. Quarren considered this, eyes flicking from human to human. Your people are resilient and stubborn, Tessa added, grinning. Never forget stubborn, Iran returned, slightly out of breath but grinning like an idiot. Okay, Quarren, are you ready for the piece de resistance, the main event of Wasting Day? Quarren blinked, their expression unreadable. I am prepared. Iran nodded with mock seriousness. Good. Tessa, would you do the honors? Tessa picked up a small device, flicking it on with a flourish. All right, everyone, she shouted, gaining the crowd's attention. Prepare for the grand finale. With a dramatic press of a button, the night sky exploded into color. Fireworks, painstakingly assembled by the engineering team, rocketed into the air, leaving trails of light and smoke. The crowd cheered, faces painted in flashes of red and green, mouths open in awe or laughter. Quarren watched, eyes reflecting the display as if capturing each burst, storing it away. This is beautiful, they finally said, their usual detachment softened. Yeah, Tessa agreed, her own gaze fixed skyward. It's something, all right. As the last firework fizzled into the night, leaving behind the echo of its explosion, Tessa felt a strange sense of accomplishment. They'd managed to survive another day and maybe even learned a thing or two from their alien visitor. "So," Iran said, breaking the silence that followed, "think we impressed them?" Quarren turned to him, something almost like a smile in their alien way. "Indeed, your traditions are illuminating." Tessa laughed, clapping Quarren on the back in a way that might have been a bit too familiar but felt right. "Welcome to the madness of humanity." For a moment, standing there with Iran and Quarren, she almost forgot about the fragile shield, the ever-present threat of annihilation. The night was still, save for the hum of the shield, a lullaby for a world on the brink. And maybe, just maybe, they had a chance to show the universe what humans were really made of. The next morning, Tessa woke up to the sound of Iran humming a terrible rendition of the old Earth song from Wasting Day. She found him in the control room, tinkering with the console, which now whined intermittently like an offended goose being prodded with a stick. "Trying to make it sound worse?" Tessa asked, leaning against the doorway and rubbing sleep from her eyes. Iran grinned over his shoulder. "Thought I'd add ambience." "Really bring out the symphony of malfunction," Tessa groaned. "You've been spending too much time with the VRICs. They're starting to rub off on you." "Funny you should mention that," Iran replied, flicking a switch that made the console squawk in protest. "Apparently, Quarren shared our little Wasting Day extravaganza with their people. It seems we've started an intergalactic trend." Tessa blinked, processing this information. "Wait, they liked it. Liked it? They're practically obsessed." Iran clapped his hands in mock glee. "Turns out the VRICs have taken to our celebrations like kids to sugar. They're throwing Wasting Days left, right, and center. It's chaos over there." "Great," Tessa deadpanned. "We've managed to culturally contaminate an entire alien society. We should get a medal." Iran chuckled, adjusting his tie, a habit that clung to him even in a universe where fashion was mostly functional. "They're requesting more details. They want to know every minute detail about every holiday we've got." Tessa sighed, her mind a whirl of potential disasters. Can you imagine them trying to emulate Halloween, or worse, April Fool's Day? That could really end poorly. "Think of it this way," Iran said, leaning back in his chair. "We've finally found a way to conquer the galaxy through the power of cultural appropriation. Something tells me this is going to backfire in spectacular fashion," Tessa muttered, eyes drifting to the console's stubbornly red status light. "It's like handing fireworks to a toddler in a shopping mall," which, incidentally, might be what they are doing right now, Iran said. Quarren sent a message. Apparently, their latest Wasting Day had a slight mishap, something about setting off fireworks inside one of their dome cities. "Fantastic," Tessa groaned, feeling a headache coming on. "How do we explain that it's not supposed to end in mass panic and property damage?" Iran shrugged, a devil-may-care glint in his eye. "We don't. We let them figure it out. It's kind of like parenting, I think. Teach 'em young, let 'em learn from their mistakes." "Parenting? Really?" Tessa snorted, shaking her head. "You're full of it, you know that." "Full of something," Iran admitted cheerfully. "But hey, on the bright side, maybe they'll be too busy partying to notice when we fix our shield." Tessa turned her attention back to the console, tapping at buttons with the precision of someone who'd spent far too long trying to coax order from chaos. "Assuming we can fix it before they blow themselves to bits." The next few weeks passed with a surreal blend of comedy and impending catastrophe. The VRICs had fully embraced the human idea of celebrations, broadcasting new holidays with the enthusiasm of a civilization that had never been told no. Quarren, in the meantime, became a frequent visitor, appearing unannounced to gather more information about Earth customs. Each visit was prefaced by a polite, if somewhat alarming, knock at the door. "Quarren," Tessa said one afternoon, as she and Iran welcomed the alien into the engineering bay yet again. "I'm almost afraid to ask what you're here for this time." Quarren inclined their head, those unsettlingly blue eyes fixing on Tessa with what might have been amusement. "We wish to learn of your traditions surrounding New Year." It seems to involve a great deal of noise and strange resolutions. Iran's laugh came out as a bark. Ah, New Year, when everyone promises to be better versions of themselves and fails by day 2, Quarren blinked, a slow, deliberate gesture. This is a tradition, more of a running joke, Tessa said, unable to keep the mirth out of her voice. We make promises to change, knowing full well it'll all go to hell soon enough. Quarren nodded, taking mental notes. We shall observe this new year and its rituals. Perhaps it will bring insight. Iran gestured expansively. Insight or just more reasons for your people to set off explosions. Either way, it'll be a blast. Tessa groaned at the pun but couldn't help her smile. You're incorrigible. As Quarren wandered through the engineering bay, examining various knickknacks and half-finished projects, Tessa leaned toward Iran. You really think this is a good idea? Them adopting all our holidays? Iran shrugged, as unconcerned as ever. Why not? It keeps them busy. Besides, maybe they'll learn something truly valuable like moderation. Tessa snorted. From us. Good luck with that. The VRIC's New Year celebration was, predictably, a mess. Reports streamed in about cities alight with fireworks, parties that turned into riots, and a distinct lack of understanding regarding the concept of a midnight toast. Iran was in his element, fielding questions from an ever-curious Quarren. So you mean to tell me your people willingly stay awake until the hour changes, just to make noise and drink fermented beverages? Pretty much, Iran said, waving a hand dismissively. Consider it a global pledge to fight time with hangovers. Quarren seemed to process this, their head tilting as always. And these resolutions, they are meant to improve your existence. Tessa rolled her eyes. That's the theory. In practice, it's more like making a to-do list you'll never touch again. Quarren nodded as if this made perfect sense. Fascinating. Tessa watched the alien with a mix of concern and amusement. So how's your empire handling all these new traditions? Any catastrophic meltdowns yet? Many are. Adapting, Quarren admitted. Though there have been incidents, some have misunderstood the concept of fireworks and created larger versions. Iran winced. Oof. Yeah, we probably should have included a safety manual, or at least a disclaimer, Tessa added. Warning, attempting to act like humans may result in property damage and existential crises. Quarren's mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. Your species is indeed unique. Iran gave a theatrical bow. We aim to misbehave. Despite the chaos, or perhaps because of it, the VRIC's fascination with human holidays continued unabated. Each passing week brought a new wave of requests for information, each more bizarre than the last. Quarren, now practically a fixture in the engineering bay, seemed to relish the challenge of interpreting human customs. We have received questions about the Valentine's Day. It involves affection and chocolate. Tessa nearly choked on her coffee. Oh boy, it's about showing love or pretending to with overpriced candy and sappy cards. Iran added with a smirk. Think of it as a test of how much commercialism you can stomach for the sake of romance. Quarren's expression was one of profound curiosity. And this is considered desirable? Tessa shrugged. Depends on who you ask. Some say it's sweet, others call it a sham. Personally, I think it's just another reason to eat too much sugar. Interesting. We shall consider this, Quarren replied, already contemplating the implications. As Quarren departed to relay their findings, Iran turned to Tessa with a bemused grin. You know, if this keeps up, we might actually change the galaxy. Not sure if that's a good thing, Tessa said, shaking her head. What's next? Teaching them about Black Friday and watching them tear each other apart over the last hover toaster. Iran chuckled. Why not? It's a bold new world out there, Tessa. A few more weeks passed, and with them, more peculiar reports from the VRIC's empire. Quarren's visits grew increasingly colorful in their descriptions of alien attempts to replicate human customs. We have perhaps overstepped, Quarren confessed during one particularly animated briefing. The VRICs have begun to argue over the true meaning of these holidays, leading to fractures. Fractures? Tessa asked, eyebrows raised. You mean, like civil disputes? Precisely, Quarren nodded. There are factions forming, each claiming different interpretations of your traditions. It has become somewhat contentious. Iran laughed, a full-bodied sound that echoed through the room. Leave it to humans to introduce the concept of bickering over holidays to an alien race. Tessa rubbed her temples. You realize we might have started an intergalactic civil war over chocolate bunnies and fireworks, right? Quarren didn't seem too concerned. Conflict is a means of understanding. We shall learn from these experiences. Iran nodded approvingly. That's the spirit. Just remember to keep the explosions to a minimum and you'll do fine. Indeed, Quarren replied, a hint of their usual enigmatic smile resurfacing. Your traditions, though chaotic, have given us much to consider. Tessa exchanged a glance with Iran. Well, at least we've given them something to think about, she remarked, a touch of wryness in her voice. And if they manage not to blow themselves up in the process, even better, Iran added, clapping Quarren on the shoulder. See, humanity isn't all bad. Quarren nodded, a gesture of understanding that seemed to contain an unspoken agreement. Perhaps there is wisdom in your madness after all. With that, Quarren departed once more, leaving Tessa and Iran to ponder the strange twist their lives had taken. They'd set out to fix a shield. Now, they were inadvertently rewriting an empire's cultural identity. As Tessa returned to her work, Iran settled beside her, still grinning like a cat with cream. Who'd have thought a bit of human insanity could change the galaxy? Tessa chuckled softly. If we manage to make it out of this without causing a full-scale revolution, I'll consider it a win. That's the spirit, Iran replied, raising an imaginary glass. To humanity, insanity and all. And as they delved back into their tasks, the hum of the shield, still holding steady, offered a comforting reminder that even amidst chaos, life continued. For now, at least, that was enough. Iran Zephyr massaged his temples, not out of a burgeoning headache, though that was certainly a threat, but because diplomacy with a bunch of aliens who'd taken a sudden liking to colorful explosions was starting to feel like trying to teach philosophy to a group of sugar-crazed toddlers. The Virix holidays had spiraled into a cosmic carnival of chaos, and Iran found himself at the eye of the whirlwind, armed only with charm and a wardrobe that could withstand a supernova. Quarren, my friend, Iran began, his voice laced with sarcasm like a bartender spiking drinks at the end of a long day. How's the galaxy's loudest circus coming along? Quarren, ever the epitome of unflappable alien grace, inclined their head. Their expression teetered between bemused and downright baffled, an all-too-common theme since this holiday obsession began. Your Valentine's Day has caused significant, let us say, romantic misunderstandings or interplanetary soap opera. Iran quipped, fully aware that the Virix were currently inventing new shades of awkward in their attempts to woo each other with heart-shaped gifts. Tessa Marlowe, tech maestro and resident realist, entered the control room, her fingers already dancing over the console's whining keys. She had a knack for keeping tech alive that was just shy of miraculous, and right now they needed a miracle. Iran, when you're done playing Intergalactic Cupid, could you remember we have a shield about to nosedive? She said, not looking up from her work. Of course, Tessa, Iran replied, feigning offense. I'm hoping the shield doesn't follow the Virix's lead and burst into fireworks. Quarren's eyes, ever so unnervingly blue, fixed on Tessa. Your technology, it remains unreliable, like a politician's promise, Tessa muttered. She gave the console a sharp tap, as if reprimanding a petulant child. The shield status lights green right now, but it's flickering like it's got a caffeine addiction. Not gonna hold for long. Iran straightened his suit, pristine as ever, and flashed Quarren one of his winning smiles, the kind that could charm stars out of orbit. Now, Quarren, I know our festivities are causing a bit of a, shall we say, cultural reawakening on your end, but if your home planets implode because they've misinterpreted a Hallmark holiday, well, there won't be much left to celebrate, right? Quarren pondered this, the corners of their alien mouth twitching in what might have been amusement. Your point is. Understood. Good, Tessa interjected, brushing an errant lock of hair from her face. Now if you want to keep enjoying all our insane customs, we're gonna need a favor. Specifically, a few dozen of your best tech geeks and a repair kit that doesn't come from the Stone Age. Quarren nodded, the motion deliberate as ever. This can be arranged. The VRICs remain grateful for your cultural contributions. Iran chuckled, a dark, throaty sound. Cultural contributions, more like cultural chaos. But hey, keeps things interesting. In the following days, Valoria's control room buzzed with the low hum of desperation. Tessa, sleeves rolled up and brow furrowed in concentration, worked tirelessly to stabilize the shield wall. The console beeped and whined like an old droid with a vendetta, and Tessa responded with the gentle brutality of a mechanic coaxing a dying engine to life. Iran, meanwhile, was knee-deep in negotiations with various VRICS factions, trying to convince them not to turn religious squabbles over holiday traditions into interstellar conflicts. His days were a blur of meetings, heated discussions, and the occasional bout of existential dread, though he'd never admit it. "This is madness," Iran said one evening, joining Tessa in the shadowed confines of the control room. He collapsed into a chair, running a hand through his hair, which was resisting entropy about as well as their shield. How do you explain to a species that love and chocolate don't always equate to war? Tessa smirked, not looking up from the console as she replaced yet another corroded circuit. "You're the diplomat, Iran. Aren't you supposed to have a silver tongue for these things? More like a throat covered in metaphorical bruises at this point," he replied dryly. "I swear, if I hear one more debate about the true essence of Valentine's Day, I'm going to start celebrating Wasting Day by drinking until I forget my own name." "That's the spirit," Tessa said, tossing aside a burned-out component like a spent cigarette. "Just remember, we've got a shield to fix and an empire to keep from collapsing. No pressure." Iran chuckled, though it was more a sound of resignation than humor. "Ah, yes. The old save the galaxy with a few half-baked ideas and a malfunctioning shield routine. Classic." The VRICS tech team arrived as promised, their entrance marked by an array of gadgets that looked like they belonged in a museum of ancient technology. Tessa eyed the collection with the same expression a cat might give a dog. It was there and she'd tolerate it, but only just. "So, what do we got here?" she asked, trying to keep the sarcasm light. "Tools of the trade or a history lesson from the Stone Age?" The VRIC's lead engineer, a stoic figure named Zyler, gave her a blank look. "These are state-of-the-art." "State-of-the-art in what century?" Tessa muttered, but she set to work regardless, directing the VRICs with the kind of authority that brooked no argument. Under her guidance, the team began the laborious task of patching up the shield control systems, swapping out components with the precision of surgeons performing a heart transplant. Iran, meanwhile, was busy keeping the peace, a task akin to juggling volatile chemicals while riding a unicycle. He stood at the center of a holographic conference, VRIC's dignitaries flickering around him like ghosts with opinions. "Ladies and gentlemen, and whatever you VRIC's folks prefer," he began, exuding a confidence that belied the twitching muscles in his jaw. "I understand the philosophical debate over the significance of overpriced heart-shaped candy is gripping, but could we maybe focus on, I don't know, not blowing each other up?" A dignitary, whose name Iran had long since stopped trying to pronounce correctly, raised an objection. "Your traditions have fragmented our unity. Each faction claims to hold the true interpretation." Iran sighed, rubbing his temples again. "Let's settle this like civilized beings. We'll declare each interpretation equally valid, and then we can all agree that it's just a holiday meant to sell more junk than usual." The dignitaries murmured among themselves, nodding their heads in a semblance of agreement. Iran took a deep breath, feeling like he'd just defused a bomb with words alone, which, in a way, he had. Back in the engineering bay, Tessa was making progress. The shield's status light flickered, but it was a steadier green than before. Slowly, painstakingly, they were cobbling together a stable system from the wreckage of past failures. Just a few more tweaks, Tessa said, wielding a spanner with the authority of a general commanding troops. Xyler hovered nearby, watching her work with a mixture of reverence and fear, a not uncommon reaction to Tessa's particular brand of engineering genius. Your methods are unconventional, Tessa grinned, wiping her hands on her coveralls. Unconventional gets the job done, Xyler. Besides, convention hasn't exactly worked out well for you guys so far, has it? The Virix engineer inclined his head, conceding the point. Your perspective is refreshing. Well, don't get too comfortable. We've still got a long way to go. Days blended into nights as the work continued, a relentless march towards stability. The shield inched closer to full functionality with each passing hour, and Tessa allowed herself the smallest flicker of optimism, not that she'd ever admitted out loud. Optimism was for the naive and the doomed, and Tessa wasn't quite ready to claim either category just yet. Iran, on the other hand, was knee-deep in cultural diplomacy, trying to untangle the web the Virix had woven around their new favorite holidays. Quarren, you do realize that wasting day isn't an invitation to actually waste resources, right? He had to ask during one particularly heated exchange. Quarren, who had become something of an expert on human eccentricities, smiled, an expression that still looked more like a grimace to Iran. The name is misleading. Welcome to human tradition, Iran replied with a roll of his eyes. Next, you'll tell me you're launching a crusade over April Fool's Day. Quarren tilted their head, contemplating. An interesting proposition. No, Iran cut in, raising a hand as if to physically block the idea. Just no. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of fidgeting with circuitry and fending off diplomatic disasters, Tessa and her team managed to coax the shield wall back into behaving like a proper planetary defense system. The status light settled on a serene green, steady and reassuring as a heartbeat. Look at that, Tessa said, stepping back to admire their handiwork. A miracle masked as hard work. Iran joined her, surveying the room full of exhausted engineers and clunky Virix tech with a sweeping gaze. Well, we've managed to keep the planet from exploding. That's a start, Tessa smirked, wiping grime from her cheek. And the Virix civilization from imploding over chocolate and fireworks, who knew holiday spirit could be so volatile, Iran mused. Tessa turned to him, her expression softening just a fraction. Here's to hoping our next adventure is less festive. Iran chuckled, the sound tired but genuinely amused. Here's to hoping. But let's face it, Tessa, with us around, nothing's ever going to be simple. Together, they watched as the shield wall thrummed quietly, a testament to human ingenuity and stubbornness, qualities that might just keep the galaxy spinning in one piece. For the moment, at least, it was enough. Iran Zephyr could hear the console's incessant whining from halfway down the corridor. It was like an electronic banshee wailing at the futility of its own existence. When he finally pushed open the door to the control room, he found Tessa Marlowe hunched over the console, muttering curses that would make a sailor blush. The status light was flickering in a way that suggested it was having an existential crisis of its own. Ah, the sweet sound of impending doom, Iran quipped, trying to lighten the mood. He was met with a glare from Tessa that could melt titanium. If this damn thing doesn't stop acting like a toddler in a candy store, we're going to be the toast at the galaxy's next barbecue, Tessa snapped, wrenching a stubborn component free with a satisfying crunch. Iran stepped closer, careful not to trip over the scattered guts of machinery that littered the floor. And here I thought we were past the whole end-of-the-world phase, he said, leaning against the wall with an exhausted sigh. The universe just loves to keep us humble, doesn't it? Tessa replied, glaring at a particularly rebellious circuit board. The shield wall's holding by a thread, and even that's being generous. Guess it's time to pull another miracle out of your toolbox, Iran said, crossing his arms. No pressure. Miracles are in short supply these days, Tessa said, her voice thick with frustration. I'm starting to think this whole shield thing is more myth than tech. Meanwhile, the Virix dignitaries were having the equivalent of an interstellar hissy fit. Iran had spent the better part of the day trying to convince them that not every Earth tradition needed to be adopted with religious fervor. But as it stood, several factions were ready to go to war over the correct way to interpret love and wasting. This is beyond ridiculous, Iran muttered, switching on his comms for yet another round of diplomatic headache. Quarren, tell me you've got some good news for once. Quarren's voice crackled over the line, as smooth and unflappable as ever. The factions have agreed to postpone hostilities. For now. Fantastic. I'll sleep so much better knowing the universe isn't literally on fire. For a few more hours at least, Iran said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Quarren's alien monotone didn't skip a beat. They've also requested more details on the cultural significance of St. Patrick's Day. Iran put his head in his hands. Oh, for the love of, have they never heard of a drinking holiday before? They are unfamiliar with the concept, Quarren replied, an undertone of amusement in their voice. Great. Just great. Next, they'll be demanding the blueprint for Oktoberfest, Iran groaned. Meanwhile, we've got a shield that's about as reliable as a chocolate teapot. Back in the control room, Tessa was elbow-deep in the console's innards, her fingers dancing over wires like a conductor flirting with an orchestra on the brink of mutiny. The Virix engineers hovered nearby, eyes wide with what might have been awe or horror, possibly both. All right, crew, we're going to need a touch of creative engineering, Tessa announced, wiping a smear of grease onto her cheek. Anyone got a spare miracle lying around? Zyler, the Virix engineer, cleared his throat, the sound barely audible over the mechanical moaning. We could attempt a bypass, but the risk of cascade failure is non-negligible. Oh, I love a good cascade failure in the morning, Tessa retorted dryly. Let's try not to blow ourselves up, shall we? Iran entered the room, looking like a man who'd just faced a firing squad of philosophical debates and lived to tell the tale. How are we doing, Tessa? He asked, his voice betraying the weariness that clung to him like a second skin. We're dancing on the edge of catastrophe, but hey, what's new? She replied, not taking her eyes off the task at hand. I've got a few tricks left, but we're running out of time. Iran nodded, understanding all too well the gravity of their situation. Well, if we can't fix it, maybe we can bluff our way out of this mess. Tessa snorted, the sound half amusement, half exasperation. Bluffing's your department, mister. Diplomat true, Iran admitted, but even my silver tongue's starting to tarnish. Quarren cracked the door open, their presence almost a soothing balm to the chaos. The factions remain tense but stable. However, they are requesting clarification on several more Earth customs. Iran rolled his eyes. Let me guess. They want to know if the Easter Bunny is a deity. Precisely, Quarren said, not missing a beat. Perfect. Just perfect, Iran said, throwing his hands up in mock surrender. Why not throw in Santa Claus while we're at it? Tessa's hands paused momentarily, and she glanced up at him. You mean to tell me they haven't already? Thankfully, no, Iran said, though the sigh in his voice said he was expecting it any moment. Look, we're doing everything we can to keep this thing from imploding, Tessa said, her voice turning earnest for the first time, but you might want to prepare for the worst. Iran nodded. I've already drafted the "we tried our best" speech. Just in case. Good, Tessa said, returning to her work. Because if this doesn't pan out, we'll need all the help we can get explaining why everything's on fire. The hours dragged by, each one heavier than the last as the ticking inevitability of failure loomed over them. Tessa worked tirelessly, fingers moving with a speed that belied her exhaustion. The console was a symphony of complaints, but slowly, painstakingly, she managed to coax it into something resembling compliance. Iran spent his time dodging more philosophical landmines with the Virix, who seemed determined to interpret Earth customs through the most convoluted lens possible. It was like trying to explain calculus to a toddler, only with the added risk of intergalactic warfare. "All right," Tessa announced finally, wiping her hands on her grimy coveralls. "I've patched what I can. Let's see if this old beast has one more run left in her." Iran joined her at the console, his expression a mix of hope and skepticism. "You sure about this?" "Not in the slightest," Tessa confessed, furrowing her brow. "But at this point we're out of options." With a deep breath she hit the controls and the room held its breath in anticipation. The console let out a groan, the lights flickered ominously, and for a heart-stopping moment everything seemed to hang in the balance. Then, miraculously, the status light turned a steady green, and the hum of the shield wall became a quiet, reassuring thrum. "Well, paint me surprised and call me an optimist," Iran said, a grin spreading across his face despite the tension still knotted in his shoulders. "We're not out of the woods yet," Tessa cautioned, though relief softened her voice. "This is a band-aid on a bullet wound, but it should hold for now." Iran nodded, knowing full well the precariousness of their situation. "In that case, let's try to keep this planet spinning while we still can." Quarren appeared beside them, their gaze flickering between the two humans. "The factions are dispersing for the moment. Your efforts have not gone unnoticed." Tessa gave a tired smile. "Well, if we're going to go down, might as well go down trying." Quarren's alien features shifted in what might have been approval. "A commendable stance." Iran chuckled, though there was a weary edge to the sound. "And if we're lucky, we might just get through this without blowing up the universe." As the tension in the room eased, Tessa leaned back, letting out a long breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Here's hoping we get a break from holiday diplomacy." Iran raised an imaginary glass in a mock toast. "To less chaos and more sanity." Tessa grinned, the expression shadowed by fatigue. "I'll drink to that." With the shield stabilized, at least temporarily, and the Vrix factions pacified for the moment, Iran and Tessa could finally allow themselves a moment of reprieve. But they both knew it wouldn't last. Out here on the edge of civilized space, tranquility was a rare luxury, one that could vanish as quickly as it came. For now, though, they were still standing, still fighting, and still refusing to let the universe get the better of them. Because if there was one thing Tessa and Iran knew, it was that they were damn good at playing the odds, even when the deck was stacked against them. As they left the control room, side by side, Iran couldn't help but quip, "So, how about we throw our own festival of peace and quiet?" Tessa laughed, the sound pure and genuine if only for a moment. "Now that's a holiday I can get behind." And with that they stepped back into the chaos of Valoria, ready to face whatever fresh madness the galaxy had in store. Little did they know, the worst was yet to come. But as far as they were concerned, tomorrow was tomorrow's problem. They still had today to get through, and that was challenge enough for anyone. In the dim, cluttered control room, the air seemed to buzz with a cocktail of desperation and caffeine, a flavor Tessa Marlowe had become all too familiar with. The console was behaving like a petulant toddler, and Tessa was the increasingly frazzled parent just trying to keep everything from imploding. "All right, you piece of motherboard misery," Tessa muttered, poking around the guts of the console once more. "Give me something I can work with." Iran Zephyr strolled in, looking as composed as ever, which was saying something considering he just handed a live grenade of cultural chaos back to the Vrix. "Still no miracles in stock?" he asked, leaning against the doorway, arms crossed like he was ready to sell tickets to this circus. "Miracles?" Tessa scoffed, shooting him an exasperated glance. "We're fresh out. But if you've got any divine interventions up your sleeve, I'm all ears." Iran shrugged, a grin playing at the corner of his mouth. "Sorry, I left my halo in my other jacket." Tessa rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a smirk. "Angel or not, we need a miracle. This console's holding together about as well as a kleptomaniac at a jewelry show." "Well, maybe there's something hiding in plain sight," Iran suggested with a wry smile. "You know, like my ability to make even the most tedious diplomatic debacle sound like a day at the beach." "How many angry Vrix did you have to placate today?" she asked, focusing on the wires with renewed determination. "Enough to start a choir," Iran replied dryly. "I swear if they ask me one more thing about the Easter Bunny, I'm going to suggest they mail a letter to Santa." Quarren, the ever-unflappable alien liaison, slipped into the room, their presence like a bomb on a sunburn. "The factions are still in a truce, though I fear it is more fragile than a soap bubble in a sandstorm," Tessa snorted. "Apt metaphor, Quarren. But speaking of metaphors, I think I've got one of those hiding in plain sight solutions, courtesy of our holiday-obsessed friends." Iran raised an eyebrow. "Oh, did they finally invent a new holiday called Save the Human Day?" Tessa shook her head. "No, but their obsession with human celebrations got me thinking. Maybe we can use their fascination with holiday lights to stabilize the shield wall." Iran blinked. "You're saying stringing up Christmas lights is going to save us?" "Not exactly," Tessa replied, rolling her eyes. "But if we could mimic the energy dispersal patterns of fireworks, something they've been doing on a cosmic scale, we might be able to reroute the power through the shield wall's failing circuits." Quarren's eyes narrowed, their alien mind clearly calculating the odds. "A risky proposition, but it holds merit. The Viriks do adore their pyrotechnics." Iran grinned, clapping Tessa on the shoulder. "You're a genius, Tessa. Now how do we convince the Viriks to lend us their fireworks expertise without sparking another interstellar incident?" "Sweet talk them," Tessa suggested, wiping her greasy hands on her coveralls. "That's your specialty, right?" Iran smirked. "I've been known to make a few friends over a cup of space tea," Quarren nodded. "I shall facilitate the communication, but be warned, the Viriks are as unpredictable as the fireworks they adore." "Predictable chaos," Iran quipped. "My favorite kind." As Quarren set up a communication link, Tessa turned back to the console, feeling a flicker of hope for the first time in days. "Let's just hope they are in a generous mood." With the connection established, Iran took the lead, projecting an image of calm authority that he didn't quite feel. "Greetings, esteemed Viriks representatives," he began, his voice smooth as polished glass. "We come with a proposition that could benefit both our species." The Viriks leader, a creature of intricate patterns and shimmering colors, peered at them through the screen. Its voice was like the rustle of dry leaves. "Speak, Iran Zephyr, we are listening." Iran nodded, weaving his words with the finesse of a seasoned diplomat. "We've noticed your fascination with our cultural practices, particularly the visual splendor of our holiday celebrations. We propose a collaboration, utilizing your extensive knowledge of pyrotechnics to aid us in stabilizing our planetary shield." The Viriks leader tilted its head, the patterns on its skin shifting in contemplation. "You request our fireworks to repair your technology. Intriguing. What do we receive in return?" "A continuation of cultural exchanges," Iran replied, "and perhaps an exclusive insight into some of our less volatile celebrations." The Viriks leader let out a noise that might have been laughter. "The promise of more Earth traditions is appealing. We agree to assist, but know this: failure is not an option we tolerate." "Neither do we," Tessa interjected, her voice firm. "We're all in this together. Let's make it work." With agreement in place, the Viriks initiated a transfer of data files detailing their fireworks technology. As the information poured in, Tessa's mind raced with possibilities. If this worked, they might just have a fighting chance. Back in the control room, Tessa pored over the Virik schematics, her fingers flying across the console as Iran watched from over her shoulder. "Looks doable?" he asked, a rare note of optimism in his voice. "Doable, yes," Tessa replied, "but not without risk. We're essentially jury-rigging the shield to run on fireworks. If it goes wrong, we'll have our very own 4th of July, only with less apple pie and more annihilation." Iran chuckled darkly. "The stakes are high, but then again they always are." "Tell me about it," Tessa muttered, focusing on the task at hand. "If this works, we'll have a stable shield long enough to figure out a permanent fix." Iran patted her shoulder. "I trust you, Tessa. If anyone can pull off a miracle, it's you." "Flattery's not gonna get this thing fixed any faster," she shot back, though she appreciated the sentiment. But thanks for the vote of confidence. With the VRIX data in hand, Tessa began the delicate work of integrating their energy dispersal patterns into the shield's circuitry. It was like threading a needle during an earthquake, but she was determined. Failure wasn't just not an option, it was a death sentence. Meanwhile, Iran returned to his diplomatic duties, which involved placating the VRIX while they eagerly anticipated the success of their collaboration. The aliens were buzzing with excitement, their love for Earth's holidays now manifesting in a more productive form. Quarren, ever the silent observer, watched Iran with interest. "You handle them well," they noted, their tone almost appreciative. Iran shrugged, a sly grin on his face. "It's all about knowing when to speak and when to listen, and when to nod like you understand what the hell they are saying. You humans are indeed strange," Quarren observed, an edge of amusement in their voice. "Strange is just another word for interesting," Iran quipped back. "And right now, interesting is our best weapon." With the VRIX appeased and Tessa working her magic on the console, a sliver of hope began to pierce the gloom that had settled over Valoria. They weren't out of the woods yet, but the path ahead was beginning to clear. Hours later, Tessa wiped her forehead with the back of her hand, smearing grease across her skin but too exhausted to care. The console was humming with a steady rhythm, a stark contrast to the erratic noises it had been producing before. Iran appeared by her side, and the look on his face was all she needed to know that he'd been holding his breath too. "Did we just pull off a stunt?" he asked, a hint of disbelief in his voice. Tessa straightened, her back cracking. "I wouldn't start the victory parade just yet, but yeah, it looks like we might have danced our way out of disaster for the moment." Iran let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, grinning like a man who just found a winning lottery ticket in his pocket. "You're a magician, Tessa. Just a mechanic with a caffeine addiction," she corrected. "But I'll take the compliment." As they stood in the control room, the air buzzed with a newfound energy. The shield was stable, the VRIX were placated, and for the first time in weeks, there was a glimmer of hope. But in the back of their minds, Tessa and Iran knew that this was just a reprieve. Challenges still loomed on the horizon, threatening to upend everything they'd worked for. Yet for now, they allowed themselves a moment of triumph, a brief respite from the chaos of their lives. Iran glanced at Tessa, his expression unreadable but for the gratitude in his eyes. "Here's to less chaos and more sanity," he said, echoing their earlier toast. Tessa chuckled, exhaustion dulling the edges of her smile. "I'll drink to that, but let's not get too comfortable. The universe loves a good kick in the teeth." Iran nodded, his eyes scanning the room one last time. "True, but for now, let's savor this tiny victory. We've earned it." And with that, they stepped back into the swirling madness of Valoria, ready to face whatever fresh insanity the universe had planned for them next. Because if they'd learned anything from their time on the edge of civilized space, it was that survival wasn't about avoiding the storm. It was about learning to dance in the rain. The dim glow of the control room was a study in organized chaos, or maybe just chaos, given the piles of half-eaten rations and empty caffeine injectors scattered about like the aftermath of a particularly unremarkable party. Tessa Marlowe, elbow-deep in circuitry, was beginning to feel like the universe's unpaid intern, constantly picking up the slack while the cosmos decided to take an extended smoke break. Iran Zephyr, her partner in this ongoing farce of interstellar diplomacy, paced behind her with the energy of an over-caffeinated ferret. "So, Tessa," he drawled, an eyebrow arched so high it was practically in orbit, "what's the verdict? Are we heroes yet, or are we still just the poor sods on cleanup duty?" "Well, if this doesn't work," Tessa replied, not bothering to turn around, "we can always try our luck as itinerant street musicians. I hear the VRIX have a fondness for earthly wailing and gnashing of teeth." Iran snorted, crossing his arms as he leaned against the console. "Yeah, right. Until they start expecting us to play Jingle Bells on repeat." Quarren, The alien liaison, whose calming presence was a little too zen for this high-stakes charade, drifted into the room. "I trust everything is proceeding according to plan," they inquired, their voice as smooth as silk and twice as impenetrable. "Plan," Tessa grumbled. "That implies some sort of organized intent. We're more like enthusiastically improvising." Iran chuckled, offering Quarren a conspiratorial wink. "Don't mind her. She's just getting into the spirit of impending doom. The VRIX leadership has expressed a great deal of interest in the outcome of our joint effort," Quarren noted, their alien features inscrutable but their tone vaguely approving. "They find your human resourcefulness refreshing." Tessa glanced back over her shoulder, a sardonic smile tugging at her lips. "Refreshing, huh? That's what they call desperation these days. Our desperation tends to look like optimism with a caffeine addiction," Iran chipped in. "Speaking of which, how about another round of disaster suppressant, Tessa?" She waved him off, a few screws clattering to the floor as she extricated herself from the console's innards. "I'm good, thanks. Too much more of that stuff and I'll start vibrating at a frequency only dogs can hear." "As riveting as it is to watch you two banter," Quarren interjected, their voice like a gentle nudge, "perhaps we should focus on rallying both humans and VRIX for the final stabilization efforts." Tessa sighed, rubbing the back of her neck. "Fine, fine. Let's get this show on the road. If we're gonna pull this off, we'll need everyone on the same page and ideally not trying to kill each other for once." Iran nodded, clapping his hands together with mock enthusiasm. "Right, folks. Time to play nice with the aliens." As if on cue, the room's comm system crackled to life, projecting the holographic images of both human and VRIX representatives. It was like a cosmic conference call, complete with the potential for spectacular misunderstandings and the usual diplomatic niceties that neither side particularly cared for. Iran straightened up, adopting the air of an interstellar game show host. "Welcome, distinguished guests. We're gathered here today not just to save our hides, but to show that when it comes down to it, humans and VRIX can cooperate over more than just mutual bafflement at our cultural quirks." The human delegates looked suitably solemn, while the VRIX representatives shimmered with interest, their skin patterns shifting like a psychedelic light show. Tessa stepped up, brushing her hands on her coveralls. "All right, here's the deal. We need both your expertise and manpower to stabilize the planetary shield wall. Think of it as the ultimate fireworks display, only instead of oohs and ahs, we're aiming for more of a thank goodness we're not dead vibe." A VRIX representative clicked what passed for a mouth, its voice a rustle of dried leaves. "Your metaphor is colorful. We are prepared to engage in this venture, provided the benefits are mutual." "Benefits," Iran repeated, as if tasting the word and finding it surprisingly palatable. "How about not getting vaporized for starters, and maybe a side of intergalactic goodwill?" Quarren, ever the diplomat, added smoothly, "Consider this an opportunity to strengthen our ties. A success here would not only save lives but pave the way for future collaborations." The human side exchanged glances, nodding with the weary air of those who've been down this road before. The VRIX, for their part, seemed intrigued, the kaleidoscope of colors on their skin hinting at a cautious optimism. "Very well," the VRIX leader intoned, their patterns settling into a more serene palette. "Let us proceed with the integration of our pyrotechnics into your shield system. We will coordinate efforts from our vessels." Tessa couldn't resist a dry smile. "Great. Just one big happy family, working together to avoid a mutual cataclysm." With the plan agreed upon, the room buzzed into action, humans and VRIX moving with a shared purpose that was as rare as it was necessary. The shield wall was a cobbled-together relic, older than anyone had a right to be, and it was going to take every trick in the book, plus a few that weren't, to get it humming along nicely. Iors stretched into an indistinct blur as the task force worked to integrate the VRIX pyrotechnic patterns into the shield's energy matrix. Tessa found herself shoulder to shoulder with a VRIX technician, their communication a mix of gestures and fractured language that somehow got the job done. Iran, meanwhile, flitted between groups like a particularly charming bee, offering encouragement and the occasional sarcastic remark to keep spirits up. "Remember, folks," he called out at one point, "failure isn't an option. Mostly because the other options are terrible." Quarren, drifting between human and alien teams, offered their own brand of serene encouragement. "Focus on the shared goal," they advised, their presence like a calming balm over the frenetic activity. The shield wall itself loomed above them, a vast tapestry of flickering light that was more temperamental than Tessa's morning coffee. Every adjustment felt like coaxing an ancient beast to life, each success a tentative step closer to averting disaster. As the final integrations were completed, Iran gathered the crew for a last-minute pep talk. "All right, everyone," he began, surveying the tired but determined faces before him. "This is it. We've sortied all the circuits, aligned the fireworks, and now it's time to see if we've cooked up a miracle or just a really impressive funeral pyre." Tessa nodded, crossing her arms. "Remember, if this works, drinks are on me. If it doesn't, well, let's not dwell on that." With a collective nod, the team returned to their stations, tension palpable as the countdown began. Iran and Tessa exchanged a glance, a shared understanding passing between them. This was it, the moment of truth. The console came alive under Tessa's hands, a symphony of lights and sound that was both exhilarating and terrifying. All around them, the shield wall crackled with energy, the Vrix pyrotechnics infusing it with an otherworldly glow. "Here we go," Tessa murmured, her heart pounding as she initiated the final sequence. The room held its breath as the shield wall shimmered, the kaleidoscope of colors dancing along its surface with a grace that belied the chaos within. For a moment, it seemed to hang in the balance, teetering on the edge of oblivion. Then, with a resounding hum, the shield stabilized, its glow settling into a steady, reassuring pulse. A cheer went up from the assembled crew, a spontaneous outpouring of relief and triumph that was as infectious as it was heartfelt. Iran let out a whoop, clapping Quarren on the back. "We did it! Bloody hell, we actually did it!" Quarren inclined their head, a rare smile gracing their features. "Indeed. A commendable achievement for both our peoples." Tessa leaned back against the console, exhaustion and elation battling for dominance. "I can't believe it worked," she admitted, shaking her head in disbelief. Iran grinned, his eyes alight with mischief. "Well, Tessa, I guess that makes you the patron saint of lost causes," she chuckled, wiping a hand across her forehead. "I'll take it. Now, how about those drinks?" The celebration was a mix of human and Vrix traditions, a testament to their newfound cooperation. Laughter and conversation filled the air, the barriers between species momentarily forgotten in the wake of their shared victory. As the festivities continued, Iran sidled up to Tessa, a glass in hand. "Here's to us," he said, raising his drink in salute. "And to proving that even a bunch of misfit humans can save the day once in a while." Tessa clinked her glass against his, a wry smile on her lips. "Here's to that. And here's hoping the universe gives us a break for once." Iran laughed, taking a sip. "Yeah, right. But you know what? Even if it doesn't, I reckon we'll find a way to make it through. We always do." As they stood amidst the revelry, Tessa felt a sense of camaraderie and hope she hadn't thought possible. The path ahead was still fraught with challenges, but for now they had won a small, hard-fought victory, and that was enough. For now, anyway. As the last of the celebration's echo faded into the metallic corridors of the station, Tessa slumped into the nearest chair, feeling like a deflated balloon that had been patched up with duct tape and sheer willpower. The chaos of the past days was finally giving way to a begrudging silence, punctuated by the occasional clink of glass and distant laughter from the remnants of their ragtag crew. Iran plopped down next to her, his grin still annoyingly intact. "So there we have it. We're officially not going to die today. Cheers to that." Tessa raised an imaginary glass because that was all she could afford right now. Yeah, I'll drink to that as soon as I can feel my legs again. Ah, the sweet victory of not being reduced to space debris, Iran mused, stretching his arms over his head. You think this kind of success will ever be boring? Not a chance, Tessa replied, her voice laced with the kind of good-natured exhaustion that only comes after narrowly sidestepping annihilation. It's funny. A week ago, I would have sold my soul for a chance at a decent nap. Now I'd settle for a floor that doesn't smell like fried circuitry. Iran chuckled, nodding toward Quarren, who was conversing with a VRIX delegate, their tones low and serious. Looks like Quarren's already drafting the next chapter in the Humans and Aliens Play Nice saga. About time, Tessa said, a bemused smile playing on her lips. For a species that can't agree on how to make a decent cup of coffee, we're doing pretty well on the intergalactic diplomacy front. True, Iran agreed, his gaze drifting to the remnants of the shield wall visible through the observation deck's window. And to think, all it took was the threat of mutual extinction and a few well-placed sparks, plus a few cultural misunderstandings to spice things up, Tessa added, recalling how the VRIX had tried to incorporate Earth customs with the enthusiasm of a toddler wielding a paintbrush. You know, I'm half expecting them to declare Wasting Day an official holiday in our honor. Wouldn't that be something? Iran laughed. They might even start celebrating Exasperation Week just for us. As they sat in comfortable silence, the weight of their shared journey hung between them, a tapestry woven with sarcasm, desperation, and oddly enough, a spark of hope. Tessa found herself reflecting on how things had changed. She had always thought that the universe had a sick sense of humor, and now she was more convinced than ever. Quarren drifted over, their expression one of cautious optimism. The VRIX Council has expressed interest in formalizing further cultural exchanges, they announced, their tone serene. It seems our joint venture has sparked a desire for more harmonious interactions. Fantastic, Iran deadpanned. More fireworks and less firestorms. Wonder if we can get them to adopt karaoke night next. Tessa snorted. As long as they understand that singing I Will Survive is mandatory. Quarren's lips twitched in what might have been an alien attempt at a grin. It is refreshing to witness such innovation in diplomacy. Your approach is unique. That's one way to put it, Tessa replied, shrugging. Or you could call it making it up as we go along. Iran leaned forward, a glint of mischief in his eyes. Hey, Quarren, what do you say we introduce them to Earth's finest culinary traditions next? I hear they're big fans of explosive flavors. Quarren considered this with an air of mock solemnity. I imagine the VRIX might find your penchant for spicy cuisine illuminating. More like incendiary, Tessa quipped, recalling the time Iran had dared her to consume a packet of Earth-imported hot sauce. But if they're gonna dive into human culture, might as well do it with flair. The three of them shared a laugh, the kind that came easily in the aftermath of shared peril. The transformation of their mission from a desperate scramble to a catalyst for unity was as unexpected as it was welcome. Despite the odds, they had forged a bond, not just between themselves but between their worlds. You know, Iran said, his voice thoughtful, for all their quirks, the VRIX have taught us a thing or two about resilience and creativity. And we've shown them that humans can be more than just stubborn sacks of water, Tessa added, with a wry grin. Turns out, we're pretty good at this whole survival of the least prepared thing. Quarren nodded, their gaze distant. Both our species have found strength in adversity. This alliance may yet endure beyond mere necessity. As Tessa and Iran exchanged a glance, the weight of the moment settled upon them. They were on the brink of something new, a future where humans and VRIX might walk together in mutual respect and understanding. It was a future built not on the ashes of conflict, but on the shared struggle to prevent it. Guess we've got our work cut out for us, Tessa said, her tone laced with determination. But if we can keep this momentum going, who knows what we might achieve? Iran raised his imaginary glass once more. To the future, then. May it be slightly less terrifying than the past. With that, they clinked their invisible drinks together, a silent promise to continue pushing forward despite the odds. As the soft glow of the shield wall bathed the observation deck in its reassuring light, Tessa couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they really were onto something. Maybe the universe, in its infinite absurdity, had finally thrown them a bone. Either way, they'd face whatever came next with the same irreverent spirit that had brought them this far. And if the universe wasn't ready for that, well, it better buckle up, because Tessa Marlowe and her motley crew sure as hell weren't done yet. As the days turned into weeks, the once tense atmosphere of Valoria began to settle into a routine that was almost normal. There was something surreal about seeing humans and Vrix working side by side, their interactions gradually shifting from awkward politeness to a more genuine camaraderie. Tessa watched as a Vrix technician shared a makeshift meal with one of the human engineers, their laughter mingling in the air like a melody of clashing cultures. It was a sight she couldn't have imagined a month ago, yet here it was, a testament to the power of shared experience and a little bit of luck. Iran sidled up beside her, his expression one of satisfaction. "Look at that peaceful coexistence. Never thought I'd see the day." "Yeah," Tessa replied, a hint of disbelief in her voice. "Turns out all it takes is a mutual desire not to explode. That, and a few cultural exchanges that involve things going boom," Iran added with a grin. Honestly, the Vrix might be onto something with their love of colorful explosions. Quarren joined them, their presence as calming as always. "The Council has expressed their gratitude for your contributions, Tessa, Iran. They acknowledge that this alliance is a testament to human ingenuity and determination." "More like stubbornness," Tessa corrected, her lips quirking into a smile. "We're just too damn stubborn to quit." "Indeed," Quarren agreed, their voice filled with a warmth that was becoming more familiar. "It is a quality we have come to appreciate." As the three of them stood there, watching the mingling of cultures that had once seemed so disparate, Tessa felt a sense of accomplishment. They had taken the chaos of impending doom and turned it into a foundation for something greater. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was a start. "You know," Iran said, breaking the silence, "I think we might actually be good at this interstellar diplomacy thing." "Don't get cocky," Tessa warned, though her tone was teasing. "We've still got plenty of chances to screw it up." "True," Iran conceded, "but at least we can say we made it this far without blowing ourselves up. That's gotta count for something." Quarren nodded, their expression contemplative. "This is only the beginning. The path ahead will not be easy, but together we can navigate it." Tessa felt a surge of determination at Quarren's words. They had faced the brink of destruction and emerged stronger for it. Whatever the future held, they would face it together, united in their resolve to build a better tomorrow. And if the universe decided to throw more obstacles their way, well, it would just have to deal with the fact that Tessa Marlowe and her crew weren't backing down. Not now, and not ever. With a final nod to her companions, Tessa turned away from the observation deck, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them. Because in the grand, chaotic tapestry of the universe, there was one thing she knew for certain: as long as they had each other, they could take on anything. And that was a victory worth celebrating.